This is Platemark. My name is Ann Shafer, and I am your host. You've reached us at Series 2 of Platemark, A History of Western Prints. We've got a treat for you today. True and I had a fairly long conversation, so no surprise we're splitting it in two, about Claude Mellan. Anybody who's studied prints probably can conjure up in their mind Mellan's portrait of Jesus Christ on the Sudarium of Veronica that starts at a single point on his nose and spirals outward in a single line. It's an engraving. It's nuts. All of the images that True and I talk about are over on the show notes, as you all know by now, platemarkpodcast.com. And also hit the support and donate button and help us keep the lights on. I think that's it. All right, buckle up. Let's get rolling. Hey, everybody. It's Ann Shafer.
Hello, Ann Shafer.
Hello, True Ludwig.
Hi there.
We have a treat for you guys tonight.
It's actually going to be a peculiar little romp down a research hole because it was going to be about this and it was going to be about that with a really clear ending and then tying it all up in a little pretty bow. But instead, it was finding out more and more about this printmaker that always blows our students' hairs back when they finally see this one piece. And so just get ready to learn about Claude Mellan because there's not enough to learn about him, but there's plenty to talk about.
Well, there is not. Somebody needs to do a big show on Mellan.
Well, that was the thing. I was just like, well, I wouldn't mind.
There's not a lot of stuff.
I mean, just like, you need to do that show on Krishna Reddy, and I'm here to help you. I'd be more than happy to work on a Claude Mellan. Let's get us together. This would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, sometimes when things come across my wire, I put them up on the Facebooks because there's lots of printmakers on the Facebooks. And the last one was an article about Krishna Reddy, who was one of Hayter's associates, and my guy Hayter. And I did write, somebody ought to do a big show, and everyone's...
And I said, when are we getting started?
When are we going to do that? I'm not entirely sure.
Well, okay, so now maybe we can get all our toy Claude Mellans together, because it'll be a ton of fun.
Okay.
So are we supposed to be all positional and stuff?
Oh, yeah. Should we position ourselves?
I'm sitting upright. What are you going to do?
We're going to tell you all about our positionality because it is only correct.
It is true.
It is true. I identify as a cis het white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her.
I identify as a gay, white, trans male, and I use the pronouns he, him.
We are recording this at the Purple Crayon Press.
Yes, we are. The happiest place on earth.
In Baltimore, Maryland.
Yes, indeedy do.
The land of the Piscataway Conoy people.
Which is a lovely place to be.
It is. We like Baltimore.
It's because it's a great print town, and you're one of the people that makes it that way.
That is true.
Of the second annual Baltimore Print Fair.
Yeah, the print fair is coming up as we're recording this, so we're getting revved up.
Oh my God, my students are jumping out of their skins. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. All right, what you got?
Well, what I got for you is, once upon a time when we were teaching history prints, at the end of the semester I would say to any random student, so what was the one image that totally rocked your world? Completely, utterly, blew your hair back. And
from the whole semester, which was hundreds and hundreds.
Hundreds. And then we had seen mountaintop moments without question. And even students that I hadn't had in that class would say, that one of the face with the spiral. I said, you mean by Claude Mellan? The one with the face with the spiral that starts in the nose and it comes outward? And I said, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. We used to actually put Claude Mellan roughly at the same time as we would talk about Jacques Callot. Amazingly enough, that was our topic on a prior episode.
It's true. We just finished it up.
Yes, we did. And the whole point of this was we had been talking about not only reproductive prints, and we had talked about our hero, Hendrik Holtzius, who had lived from 1558 to 1617. And he was a Netherlandish, a Dutch artist. And then we had talked about Callot, who was from Nancy, and he was French. And he was born in 1592 and died early in 1635. They overlapped just enough, because I think there's no way that one could not have been aware of the splendor of the swell and taper of a single cross contour of a Holtzius line. And Callot had to have been aware of the beauty of the swell and taper of the engraved line when he invented his échoppe,
right,
so that he could replicate the sense of that engraved mark on his plates that he would scribe and then etch, which was, of course, much faster, letting the chemicals do the work. Well, what we would do is then say, can you tell if this is engraved or is this etched? And it was always fascinating. We give our props to Claude because he was so shrewd figuring out how to make the chemicals do the work. And he was the photojournalist that took this whole concept of recording visual history as literally a photojournalist, if you will. The first time we've seen war art, for instance. But Claude Mellan was a guy who just perfected the swell and the taper of the engraved line. And it's interesting because they do overlap.
I thought Holtzius was pretty darn good at the swell and the taper.
Oh, yeah. He was freaking brilliant.
Right.
But what Mellan did was hook them all together.
Oh.
It's as though he took Holtzius and he didn't do any cross-hatching. He would do parallel lines. But Mellan. Yeah. Holtzius would use a cross contour and it would end up being kind of a wire crosshatch appearance. But Mellan would hook those lines all together. His lines would always be parallel, but rarely would there be crosshatching. And they would be engraved, but it was his unique way of doing that. It just hadn't been seen before. He was unprecedented in the way he had created this mode of working. But, You know what's really fascinating, though, is when we started out way back with Palaiuolo, one of your points about the difference between the North and the Italians was that the Italians were working with the parallel hatching, and that's one way you can kind of tell, aside from the color of the ink, which is sort of silvery down south. But in my mind, cross-hatching was an advancement. Oh, indeed.
But now we're retreating. Yeah,
we are, because it's both a different way of rendering, and I think...
Well, he perfects it.
We're going to talk about the Holy Face, and you're going to...
Yeah, we'll get there.
But this is bait, just to annoy you.
We're going to start with some other stuff.
Because the concept of Claude distinguishing himself by being able to do the échoppe, or Holtzius being the chameleon who could do reproductive prints in the style of, or his own prints in the style of a whole range of masters, that tells you that printmakers are starting to rise to the top. A little bit more and a little bit more. And in a prior episode, we'd also talked about Anthony van Dyck, who was Peter Paul Rubens' star pupil. And Van Dyck had started this magnificent volume called the Iconography, or the Iconography, which was a whole gathering of portraits, engraved portraits of brilliant minds of the day.
But no text, right? It was
it was just the images.
That's amazing.
And so the concept of the portrait, to me, is thrilling. And I want for Anne to remind you that Van Dyck had done his self-portrait of his head, which was glorious, and it was done in etching, and it's all beautifully florid and wonderful. And then he hands it off to the engraver, who finishes out the entire design by putting that gorgeous head on a bust, on a pedestal, with a whole bunch of great lettering and some billowing clouds and stuff behind him.
It doesn't fall flat, but it does show off the major difference
in
between
a way,
the two.
But it also was paying an homage. I always point this out, how the engraver didn't polish out the tiny little scratch across Van Dyck's mustache, because he's the master. But the idea of artists, of printmakers distinguishing themselves is one thing. Now,
and also the artist does genius, finally.
Absolutely.
I mean, the Renaissance guys were...
They are, but these guys have taken their clues from them, but now they are even more... I mean, you had these mountaintop folks, right? You had... Even they, in their day, would have regarded Leonardo and Raphael as Ninja Turtles, had they known the term.
Right.
Yeah. But they had these folks that they were emulating. I think that building on a marvelous tradition, because I'm going to bring up now as a printmaker, printmakers always are feeling like the redheaded stepchild. I was so ignored. Nobody paid attention to me in their history books.
I've quit saying the redheaded bastard stepchild. I've started saying the scrappy underdog.
Okay. I never said bastard. I just said
I always did.
Wow. Okay, this, for once, the proper lady is... Ooh, salty language lady.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's actually really fun. I've had some impact on your life. One of the things I love to bring up, though, is that Giorgio Vasari had printed his lives of the artists, sculptors, and architects. The first edition was published in 1550, and I have a wonderful cover that I'm sure that Anne's going to include in the images for you.
Yeah, the title page.
It's fantastic, and it's obviously engraved with a ton of great information and this extraordinarily long title. I love these blah, 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 long titles, yada, yada, yada. But the very first edition was 2 volumes, and it was published in 1550. And the neat part, though, was the second printing in 1568 was 3 volumes, and it included an entire chapter on printmakers. damn Skippy. Now, there's another funny little squibbit that I discovered. It was in the second printing, Vasari paid more attention to the Venetian painters, which really irritated some of the Florentines, but because he was so Florentine-centric with his views. But it was still the first, essentially, art history book of all time.
Right.
Within the first 18 years of its printing, it had already realized that the printmakers need to be in this volume. But as you'll hear later on, printmaking still hadn't really gotten the same foothold as the big boys. So I wanted to point that out, that not just printmakers getting their just desserts, if you will, but also artists wanting to establish themselves and knowing that Jacques Callot was included in Van Dyck's Iconography. And
Who
so,
was only a printmaker.
Yes,
just to remind
exclusively,
everybody.
Which was really quite wonderful.
Yeah.
And Vorsterman, the crazed Vorsterman, had done a beautiful job of reproducing Peter Paul Rubens' images and also almost assassinating him, made the cut. And there's gorgeous etchings of him in that volume.
If this is all surprising to you, you should go back to the episode on Jacques Callot. No, reproductive print. I don't even know which one it is.
Well, what I'm trying to do is sort of tie together some threads that have been starting to squirt forward. You know, we're herding cats or earthworms.
It does start to spread, really.
Well, it's really spiff, you
Yeah.
know? But the idea of establishing engraving, as we had spoken in reproductive printmaking, and it becomes very, I don't want to say hackneyed, but it's very predictable, and there's a certain way that marks were made, and you would describe certain textures a certain way. But we get to somebody like Claude Mellan. I'm showing Anne this wonderful self-portrait that Claude Mellan had done in 1635. That's the year that Jacques Callot dies.
Uh-huh.
But here he is, and in a way, he's at the same point with that same kind of winsome look that we see Rembrandt in his self-portrait on a windowsill. And you know, those were done within 3 years of each other.
What? Wait, hold, what?
Yeah. So the other thing we have to realize is how these inroads are made in these different areas. Because we haven't heard Jacques about, we haven't heard Jacques about the French up until Callot, really, right?
It's hard to remember that because we have to deliver it linearly.
That's the hope, right?
Well, right, but that we have Rembrandt and Callot, you know, running.
Well, I
next
mean,
to each
Rembrandt was looking at Callot,
right? And
Rembrandt had a wonderful print collection. And Rembrandt was 1606 to 1669. Well, you know, Claude Mellan is 1598, and this is great, to 1688.
Holy cow.
Exactly.
Jesus.
90 years.
Wow.
And you know, another artist that lived to be 89 or 90 years?
Michelangelo, right?
Indeed. And
Didn't Leonardo live a long time?
He was pretty ripe age. What is it? 1452 to 1519.
Okay, just so you know, everybody, True just whipped that out of that brain of his.
I'm sorry, but
I don't know how you do it.
We're talking about Claude Mellan, who was born in Abbeville, France. But the other thing I want to throw in there, that he had lived as long as Michelangelo, but you would want to realize that he is in exactly the same pocket was essentially Caravaggio was...
What?
Yeah, because Caravaggio dies in 1610, and Claude Mellan is somewhat of an inheritor to the Caravaggesque light and shadow.
Whoa.
And you know whose years really match up perfectly with him is Gian Lorenzo Bernini.
Bernini?
Mr. Baroque Rome.
Mr. St. Teresa in Ecstasy?
Yeah, the embracing arms of the...
Oh, yeah.
Of St. Peter. We're speaking Catholic Counter-Reformation. Mm-hmm. And we're speaking about absolute faith and commitment. Gian Lorenzo Bernini really enjoyed the work of Claude Mellan and actually had him do a couple reproductions of his work.
Whoa.
Exactly.
Did not know that.
And the fact is that I think if you look at Claude Mellan's work and you notice a certain... there's times when there's marks that he makes that could only be made by a person of faith who is using the time spent in meditative, like with Schongauer. When you look at artists that have these pieces that took so long to create, it's that place that they go where making the work is a form of worship as well. When we start talking about the Holy Face, I don't think there's a way a person could have done that without an absolute belief in themselves, their subject matter, and what the church was supposed to be doing. And Mellan, and Bernini, and even Caravaggio are all a part of this Catholic Counter-Reformation when it's really built its strength. And now Rome is on its ascendancy. It's back from it's way past the sack of Rome. It's now in its heyday. We're talking the high Baroque. So when we look at Mellan, first thing would be that I would ask the students, well, what's the print you remember? It would be the Holy Face. Okay. And there was one other Mellan in the collection at the BMA that I would ask you to pull. You should see this wonderful series of micro expressions that are fluttering across its face.
My slide projector is flashing images in front of my face.
It is Delilah cutting Samson's hair.
Oh my goodness.
The fact was that more than likely the face of Samson was a self-portrait.
Oh, good God.
And it makes sense when you're looking at this lovely face, this wonderful self-portrait that Mellan has done, and it looks like all the world, like it should be one of the pages in the Iconography. At any rate, I would like for you, Miss Ann.
And also for you listeners out there, you probably only know Mellan by the Holy Sudarium face. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to try and open him up so that you realize that he's done a bunch of other things, and some of them are really weird and cool.
Because the thing is that I knew of the Holy Face and I knew some biblical things, but I didn't realize that he was such a crackerjack portraitist. Mm-hmm. I was not aware of this absolutely winsome self-portrait. Which, if you look at it, you see how it says Clavdiv, mm-hmm. Claudius?
Yes.
Actually, it's because everything's been Latinized or Romanized, so the U's look like V's.
Yes.
Well, here we have Claudius Mellan, Natione Gallus, Pictor et Incisor.
Ah, painter and printmaker.
Correct. But he's Gallus, he's Galatian, he is a Gaul. He is French. And he's very proud of that. And you will see that in many, many images, even though he's done some training in Italy. So he's even done reproductive prints of people by, not just Bernini, but like Pietro da Cortona, who was the ceiling painter for the big hallway, the triumph of the Barberini family, Pope Maffeo Barberini. This guy was doing reproductive prints of that guy. So he knew the big bright lights of the Italian Catholic Counter-Reformation Baroque.
Baroque.
Who would have known, right? But he is so proud of being French. But look at this adorable face. And why, look, Anne.
He's got
that's exactly right. Isn't that adorable?
It was the fashion.
The
fashion of the day.
And he's very fashionably dressed. He even has the sleeves with the little tufting through them.
The amazing thing to me about this one is that the background is the most rigid grid. I don't even want to think about trying to engrave that.
Oh, dear God, no.
There's kind of a slight halo where the lines don't quite meet the hair. Like there's sort of a glow around his hair. Mm-hmm. Not probably on purpose, just because those lines don't quite, connect.
But it is... Wow.
Yeah.
It's sort of doing that. But the other thing is, this is from 1635, and he has not done the Holy Face. He has not really quite perfected his signature trick. And I'm not going to say gimmick, which is what Linda Holtz says.
You're right. I just realized he's got cross-hatching in the back.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But you can still see all this glorious cross contour on the...
He's going to drop it soon.
Ba-bam. So here, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So I'm putting our friend Claude Mellan in that same pocket. I mean, this is at the same time. This is portraits done the same year that Jacques Callot dies. Callot, is imitating the kind of mark that Mellan would be making. But the reason we know Mellan is because of the Holy Face.
Right.
Well, that won't come along until 1649. Ooh. So what's happening before then?
Got some few years in there.
Indeed. So things that are going on. Well, in the writings... And I'll tell you that I did look very heavily at one really beautiful article that I want to give credit to Sonia Del Rey, who had written...
I know her.
Okay. Aren't you happy?
Sorry.
National Gallery of Canada?
Yes, I know her.
Well, have you met her at stuff?
Yeah, she's in the print council.
Well, duh. See, I haven't met her because...
She's younger than me. She's not... Yeah.
Oh, no, that can't be possible.
Well, I'm just saying.
Oh, no. Nobody's younger than you. But it's a great article. It's a familiar face? ? Unveiling Claude Mellan, and it was about a significant gift to the National Gallery of Canada. But her reading on the Holy Face is it's splendid. So I'm going to have to quote her directly. However, one of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention, even her Wikipedia will say that Claude Mellan was known as a draftsman, engraver, and painter. Painter? Draftsman because drawing, right?
Sure.
And good drawings become prints,
right?
But painter, I never in a million years thought of him as a painter. And when we think about it, I think of Goya as a much better printmaker than a painter. Rembrandt, well, it was both and. I mean, he could do both beautifully. Holtzius was an amazing printmaker, and he put his Buren down in 1601 and picked up his paintbrush. It amazes me that he could shift horses midstream like that. But
I agree.
I think his hands,
he was tired.
Yeah, his hands and his eyes and all of that could even. It's very demanding. At any rate, so that's laying the foundation of this. The other thing that you'll see if you were to look into Linda Holt's History of the Print in the Western World, published in 1996.
Kind of our base.
Has been our base, but it would be that, and I can't disagree, that we have not talked about the French until we got to Jacques Callot.
Jacques Callot, right.
And they're remarkably undistinguished, are the French, until the early 17th century.
Like you could almost believe that no one was actually making prints until Callot.
Exactly. Jacques Bellange.
Bellange, who's very odd.
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, very odd.
But here we have Mellan coming out of this. So here's a fellow who was born in Abbeville, France. And one source will say he came from a family of coppersmiths. Another one will say that he was the son of a customs official, both of which could be true. But one of the things he did early on with his engraving was I love this. I'm actually including this early because I think it's fascinating. The way that we know that he's made it to Paris from Abbeville in 1619 is that we have prints that he's made that are advertisements, if you will, for the theses that are being presented.
What?
For instance, this one here is the theological thesis of Antoine Talon. And what it is the person who is going to be defending their thesis at the college or the university would have this engraving made that would say, I'm going to be giving this talk. These are the points I will be making. This is the argument I'll make. And this is what my resolution will be.
What?
This is when education really... Can you imagine?
No.
Defending your thesis.
How much money are they spending on these?
Well, okay, so who gets to have those education? It's not like they're going to get their Biden
nobles,
personal student loan forgiveness, right?
Right.
It's also dedicated to the Cardinal Giulio Mazzarino. So...
Yeah, Jules Mazarin.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
he's Italian. Look at that.
Yeah. So, but now take a look at the image, Anne, and now realizing that this is your invite to somebody's thesis defense.
This is weird. Okay, so just to remind everybody, this is Claude Mellan. It's a print.
An engraved print.
An engraved print.
And actually it's a broadside, so usually pretty large.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why they don't tend to survive.
20 by 22. Yeah, they're usually posted up around town, right?
Yeah, and that's a big plate.
Yeah, 20 by 22. That's a huge plate. Theological thesis of Antoine Talon. I don't know what I can't read the tiny little writing.
Aren't you lucky?
Who is going to engrave that? That's nuts.
Well, evidently Claude Mellan will.
Did he do all the writing?
Absolutely.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, so there is kind of I don't even know. They look like sort of big steps, maybe a stage edge, and there's a guy naked with some cloth wrapped around his groin. And what is he holding in his right hand?
It's a club. And if you look at what's across his groin, it also seems to have paws. It's a lion skin.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, we're talking about the lion skin. It's Hercules. So here's but it's a whole thesis on theology, and I'm not even going to pretend that I understand who the female in the above him is.
There's a sort of
Saint
Teresa sort of figure in the top.
And there's this. Well, okay, but could we say that these figures look like they're quite classicizing? Are they kind of emulate I feel
like we're in Rome.
Well, because that's where this is going to start happening, right? Now,
this is so weird. And then there's action in the background.
Yeah. So the whole point is, imagine what theology must have been back in those days. I don't have a date for this. No, I do. I lied.
Yes, you do.
This was 1648. But he did these thesis things throughout his life.
What?
Yeah.
So these young doctors getting their doctorates.
Their thesis defense.
They're becoming priest types?
Or philosophers. Or there's another one in here for philosophy.
Huh.
Yeah. It's a whole new genre that I was completely unaware of.
Me too.
But it also excites me because it really says, hey, I've been studying and I have this new contribution to make to our intellectual progress.
But knowing that they'd be pasted up, like they're not really for longevity's sake.
No, but it's saying there's a new smart dude in town. It's
like your calling card.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that you're going to be presenting your thesis and you're going to have to defend it in front of a bunch of scholars, which makes this something that's out. It's not like you're going to get it in the postal and you're going to open it. Oh, isn't that nice?
Right.
Little so-so is going to have his nice little
Yeah.
This is his magnum opus. He's pronouncing what he believes in this whole new series of discoveries he's made, his philosophies of how to line things up. Does this not tell you how
So
important
bizarre.
intellectual rigor is
Yes.
to the time of its day?
Yes, we're heading into the Enlightenment here.
We're certainly laying the groundwork
Yeah.
for it. Because if you think about the fact that these are for people attending the colleges and the universities of the day, and that they're doing all of these intellectual pursuits, and you can already see all the classicizing elements, and it's so rich, these kinds of emblems that are so peppered through here. In another spot in this little chat we're going to have, you're going to find out that engraved portraits were more expensive to get than painted portraits.
Yeah, that really is weird.
So this idea of genius, the idea of expanding what the knowledge base is, that an individual can continue to improve and offer more to the pot of intellect of the time is huge.
But I'm fascinated by these, young, I suppose, doctor types, philosophers, whatever's. I mean, who was the first one to say, I'm going to hire that guy Mellan to make a broadside that I'm going to have my cousin post all over town? Like, it's bizarre.
Well, it's kind of wonderful when you consider it's a new form of image making.
Yeah.
As we'll see that portraits also, that images are becoming very powerful currency. Aha, wait, did I just say currency?
Yes, you did.
Oh, images on money, power. It's fascinating to see him at work with this.
What's going on in that sort of
don't know.
columnette
Doesn't
thing?
it sort of look like to me, it was sort of looking like a chandelier. I can't
I
even
don't
begin
know.
to tell you.
Weird.
But y'all are going to get to guess.
Yes, you're all going to have to take a look.
And it's not, you'll realize that it's a lion's paw that's there in Hercules' lab. Just so you know.
Aye.
Wakey, wakey. Sometimes things line up in interesting ways. Well, all right. We know that young Claude Mellan has gotten to Paris by 1619, and he now goes to Rome in 1624. And he's studying engraving with a Villamena fellow that dies the same year, which is kind of a bummer, but these things happen. But at the same time, he starts taking lessons from someone that you may have heard of in the painting world named Simon Vouet.
Vouet, right.
Very French.
Yes.
But he has been in Rome since 1614. And remember, the French, everyone was flocking to Rome because this is this Italomania, because of the mythology, because of the scholarship, because of the classical, all of those kinds of things. And remembering also that France was still, at this time, air quotes, relatively unremarkable in art. But
was it actually France by then, or was it still duchies?
It's the Galicia, right?
Right.
It's the Gallica. But the idea that you have to go to Rome because that's where you learn these things.
And that continued for centuries.
Absolutely. I mean, even Rubens was there. He was there for 8 years, from 1600 to 1608.
We still have people going to Rome.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the Grand Tour.
Right.
Well, who doesn't? You took your boys to Rome.
I did.
And you were there. This is, by the way, sidebar. Anne was there. They were going to show the boys the Sistine Chapel and so on and so forth. But they get to Rome and, some pope had, died. And so everything was shut down because the cardinals were all in
the enclave.
In the enclave, and they kept putting the black smoke up, and so Anne and the boys didn't get to see anything
Yeah,
there.
we didn't get into the Vatican.
But what I did say is, buy me something popish.
Oh, right, I did.
And
I found the best thing.
It's an amazing thing. I use it every single semester because it's a chart of all of the popes going all the way back to Saint Peter. You are Peter, the rock upon whom I will build my church. And I hold that out, and it goes all the way to, at the time, was Pope John.
Was it little heads or their medals?
Medallions with their dates. And it's like, this is not play acting. These are people who were God's presence on the earth. They were ruling, if you will, and holding this Catholic Church together, and we still have them happening today.
Well, and that poster, if I recall correctly, this was back in maybe 2012 or something. This was a while ago. Whenever the last pope died, actually. And we can look that up.
It was before Benedict.
It was before Benedict. It was John Paul.
Yeah, John Paul II.
Yeah. I found the poster at one of those sidewalk. I'm selling postcards kind of vendor guys. Like it was, just they were everywhere.
I use it every semester, and it blows their doors off. It's like, this is real. You are Peter. You are the rock. Saint Peter's the rock upon whom I will build my church. And so this concept that, Pope Julius had put this all in back, and I'm going to make Rome the glory that it was of the age of old. Well, then, okay, it gets sacked there for a while, but then they get their act together and they figure out, okay, let's do a counter-reformation, and Michelangelo's going to paint The Last Judgment, and we're going to start bankrolling all these small Catholic churches that are pop up all over Rome, kind of like McDonald's, if you will. There's a new Catholic church on every single corner being designed by all these architects and decorated by artists, and that's the climate that Caravaggio and Bernini and Claude Mellan and Pietro da Cortona, that's why the Italian Baroque becomes the Italian Baroque,
Because there's a lot of money in it.
There's tons of money in it. And, how do you get people back to the church? Bigger, brighter, better, louder. Baroque is the art of...
the superlatives.
Exactly. And the Catholic Counter-Reformation is all those bigger, brightest, bestest. And I also feel as though it's that... the deepest sense of faith. For instance, Gian Lorenzo Bernini practiced the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius every day.
What?
At San Ignacio. He was an incredibly devout artist.
Oy.
So he would go through all of the physical manifestations of what it's like. You can hear the agony of the people frying in hell and all of these things. When I think of the fact that Bernini could look at Claude Mellan and say, you're the guy that could engrave something for me, that's a big statement. Mellan did approximately 400 engravings. About 25% of those are portraits. When he's studying with Simon Vouet, and Vouet says, you got to really practice drawing. Drawing is the basis of all good engravings and all good paintings. You need to practice drawing. Draw, so that you understand how to notice things and really get a good glimpse of those things. It's also finding the truth in the moment and the truth in the people that you're studying as a portraitist. This is one of the things that Mellan brings to the fore. I might have to get on my little soapbox here in a second. Vouet, who really only lived about 59 years, is summoned back to France by none other than Louis XIII, who says, come on back, I want you to be my court painter. You might recall that Louis XIII is the one that invaded Jacques Callot's hometown, so all of these things are piling up on each other. It's all connected, really. So Vouet had said to Mellan, you got to draw, and it's the strength of all of that. Do all the portraits you can. And so Mellan would study, do little drawings. We have about 100 drawings left of his. And for some weird reason, a lot of them are in Stockholm.
What?
I have no clue.
Interesting.
I know, right? Mellan does some engraved copies after Vouet's painting. And in this case, I'm actually going to show Anne something called Caritas Romana. It's a great engraving. What do you think of this, Anne?
Judging from the lines in the moire, I'm saying it can't be that big.
Yeah, it's not that big.
No, 3 millimeter. Okay, yeah, it's not big.
It's not very big.
It's maybe 6 by 8.
Yeah.
Something.
But you can also tell by the size of the letters.
Exactly. Okay, so there is a woman.
A buxom woman.
A buxom woman who is grasping to her breast an old gentleman. Now, I don't know that
If I remember correctly, Caritas Romana is that she is helping the charity.
Did she feed him?
Yeah, she's feeding him with those...
boobs.
Those large things.
I've always thought that was an odd and weird subject.
Charity still appears like that in the 19th century.
Really?
Yeah, Daumier actually does a couple images of Charity holding these children up to her enormous hooties as she's sitting on a throne. Hey, man, Charity begins at home.
I know, but it's a little
Unless you're not
weirdly
if you're an A cup,
sexually-
nah, it's not sexual. You're just being, come on.
You're just a machine at that point.
Well, you're a wet nurse, if you will. At any rate, look at the face of this old man, and you notice how this is being rendered by our friend Claude Mellan, and he's definitely signed it down there, and he's doing it in Rome. Mm-hmm. But wait, it is a reproductive print by a painting by none other than the person he was learning from, Simon Vouet, the French painter. And I wanted for you to have a chance to see how well Mellan is translating the painted mark to the engraved mark. And you can already see the Mellan-ness of it. Even though he's still using a grid in the background, we're starting to get the moire, and we're starting to get this cross contour. And the hair, I think, is wonderful. This is a kind of a comparison to see what this engraver would do to render the painted work of his master.
Yeah, he does a masterful job because he is Claude Mellan. But the interesting thing is that while the painting by Vouet has very Caravaggesque lighting, Mellan has kind of left that to go.
Yeah, it's not his largest concern. I actually feel as though there's more structure in the bones and the build of the figures.
They do look more substantial.
They look more like they could hold up their own weight. Here, this could just sort of melt into the painted image, could sort of, it's almost like the boneless chicken ranch if you think about it. It could really melt away. And I'm giving you a second version.
Oh, God.
Just to see what you think, because, this one is attributed, or is it not, or which one's the original?
To Vouet?
Yeah.
Ew.
Because, it was a winner. Winner, chicken dinner.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I know, but I can still see that Mellan has got this sensitivity to picking out these details, the important ones, and letting the smaller things go. They're not necessary,
Right.
So he does those kinds of things, but Mellan also is a painter. And so I wanted to put on your radar one of the paintings that we do have of his from the 1620s. And just have you take a look and see what you think of this, Miss Anne. It is Samson and Delilah.
Samson and Delilah.
And it's in oil.
Yeah. Oh, it's big. 49 by 69 inches.
Which is peculiar.
That is weird.
It's wildly Caravagesque, right? There's tons of
is.
tenebrism, meaning there's tons of super high contrast, light, dark. It's almost like the film noir of religion, yes? Mm-hmm. All right, so there's Delilah, and she's got Samson's head in her lap, and he's all... And she's got her little scissors in her hand, and she's shushing somebody that might make too much noise and wake him up.
Yeah, she's got her finger to her lips, and her blouse is very handily falling off her shoulder, as though she's a sex bot kitten.
But it is the Baroque era, and of course these comely wenches, but in this case has done something significant. But I wanted you to see what a Mellan painting was, because I was searching around for them, and many of his paintings are lost, but we, as I may have said already, that we know what some of his painted images look like because he did reproductions of his own paintings.
Funny.
Yeah, but in a way, like with Mellan, if Albrecht Dürer only made 3 pieces in his entire life, it would be those 3 great engravings of 1513, 1514,
Indeed.
right? This is the one that was in the BMA commit.
Oh, thank you. Yes, now I remember it.
And this, Delilah cutting Samson's hair, I don't know the date. I hadn't been able to find it on any site.
Yeah.
But it's a good size, it's like almost 8. It's 8 by 5.5, and you can definitely see the beautiful Claude Mellan engraved lettering, and he's always going to give himself the credit. And look, here, Mellan not only painted it, but he fetched it, he sculpted, and he fetched it, But take a look at this. Look how cute those little scissors are. What do you think? Now, she's a buxom lass, yes?
She kind of looks Vermeer-ish in a way.
Yeah.
With those little scissors.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's definitely got some sort of bustier,
She's
jacking the boys
bustier,
up.
some pearls on, and her hair is quite nicely done.
It's quite the style. And look, no more.
Oh, yeah.
There's no cross-hatching in the back now. It's parallel lines that run all the way through it. But look at the head in her lap.
Yeah.
Now, I want you to think back to that handsome fella that we looked in that self-portrait from 1635. And
yes.
I remember reading on that card in the collection, it's like, this is a self-portrait. And I bet you cash money it is.
Yeah.
Why not insert yourself in the work? But it's delightful. And look how genre that is.
It is genre, and there are these moments that are just the barest indication of some lace around her neckline and on her wrist. Like, if you zoom in, you could probably convince yourself that was etching.
Yeah, and then the lightness of the touch in the damask or the flower print on her sleeves.
Yeah.
And the delicacy of the little spindles of hair that are coming off. It's delightful. And come on, is that like a 1/4 view?
Yeah, no, that face down in her lap is amazing.
Look how beautiful the volumes of that are. It's just darling and winsome.
And in my brain, Samson had like some long ass, ponytail. Like he wasn't a Van Dyck wearing,
Right, but she's already snooped off, one snoop but too much. She's already taken off some of it. It doesn't look particularly even. Isn't that adorable?
It is cute.
But I remember well, and I wanted to remind you of that. We have seen thesis advertisements, and we have seen biblical stuff. And so Mellan then has been encouraged to draw by Vouet, and he has been working on this, and the sources say that he developed a very simple and natural style, which is, I think, in the portraits, really quite obvious, as opposed to when he's doing his landscapes. and the larger set pieces, they're much more geometrically laid out, and they're very stagey, and they look amazingly like Poussin.
Oh, not Poussin.
Yeah, because he was the big dealio, right?
Yeah.
And I know that he's incredibly important for the way he laid out his canvases. I mean, phenomenally so. He had the sanction of the Academy and all of the literati that's like, Poussin is the great painter. And I know Anne and I are both like eye-rolling.
Really?
Because it does not click for us, of course. And Poussin, who was painting exactly the same time as Rembrandt, thought that was the lowest of all that naturalism. He just thought that was dreadful, drivel. Oh, God, he thought that was the worst.
So he's all elevated and giving you glory on high?
St. John riding the such and such on the island of Patmos with Greek ruins behind and trees that are forming, bring the repoussoir elements and the clouds that look like they went, like on a stage. And the skies are that perfect postcard blue. It's just, it's a frozen set piece. And so
lifeless.
Yeah. But the thing that's interesting is Mellan, with his portraits, they are so life-like, like filled with life. Even in this biblical scene, there's something very ginger, timid, lovely, wonderful. There's some sort of intrigue there. And as opposed to if you look at the rather lugubrious seeming, all of the other Baroque painters in this classical mode, they're just so pompous to me. And that's not really fair. So while our buddy Mellan was in Rome, he's doing a lot of reproductive work, as I'd said, after, Cortona and Bernini.
He's got to make a living.
He does. And by 1637, he's back in Paris. On the way, he stops at Aix-en-Provence, and that's where he does something so, so wonderful. That's going to be our after-dinner treat for these nice folks, because we're going to see this astonishing thing he did then.
Right.
When he gets back during 1637 or so, is when he really develops his air quotes, idiosyncratic technique with the not cross-hatching, but with the parallel lines. But in the meantime, I wanted to bring to your attention a couple fabulous portraits. I'm sorry, I've been looking at Girolamo Frescobaldi, and I gotta say, that is a scrumptious portrait.
Well, and the thing that's striking me is that it looks like it's lit like a movie set.
Yeah.
The light coming down across his eyes, the lighting is so bizarre.
Well, it's also just delicious. And still again, Claude Mellan, Galish, see? And it's still saying, I drew this and I engraved it.
Right.
And here it's Hieronymus Frescobaldus. Now it's been Latinized, which is pretty funny. There's aspects of trompe-l'oeil starting to play in here, because it's like a recession into space.
I just noticed that. Wow, weird.
Yeah, so he's really playing with depth now.
So the portrait is a bust portrait, and it's set in an oval. And behind the oval, sort of on the rectangle, are these parallel horizontal lines only.
Which is terrifyingly even.
Scary. He must have had a multiple tool or something.
I doubt it, honestly. Okay. You can't do this stuff here if you can't pull that off. It's
okay, so here we're seeing the beginning of the circular. Okay, so behind the head of the guy inside the oval.
With his bedroom eyes. You've got to admit those eyes.
Does have bedroom eyes.
Really
the background is just this kind of whoosh of parallel lines swooping up and over his head in this kind of arc. And half of them have a cross-hatching that's helping you understand that it's a concave space. Thank you.
Look at the shadow under the collar.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's insanity. It's just so splendid.
And I'm sure
to
it's
see.
judging from his signature, it must be like, 5 by 7.
And this is like early, 1619, but look at the frankness of it.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Not as in Frankish, but it is a very frank, it's not even pompous. This looks like somebody who's very secure in their... It is very casual.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that he's credited with. It's one of the things that sets him apart, and he becomes very sought after as a portraitist. He's very natural, sympathetic, or the way... It
looks like it could be his roommate, and he just said, I need to draw a portrait. Can you sit for me?
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy that... He almost looks like he just woke up, or he's had a couple too many.
Right.
But he's also unbelievably handsome.
Yeah, he's a good-looking guy.
And I let off with him. I couldn't help it. I was like, Frescobaldi. Now, check out this beautiful portrait of Virginia de Vezzo.
Virginia DeVezzo.
Now, she was an Italian painter.
Oh.
And that's the other thing that's lovely, is that you start to see more women who had actual skills, not just Richie Riches, but this Italian painter. It's using that similar technique, right? It's got the head in as though it's through a porthole, but with a concave kind of an atmosphere. But you can even see the shadow of her behind her now.
Yeah, that background behind her is...
And that, look at that, ta, 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 ta.
Yeah, it's much more
and look at
complicated
this.
than the last one.
Virginia DeVezzo delle Pittrice.
Oh.
She's a painter. Now, this ought to get us going, because this has got us some zoomy zooms. So, if you're lucky, you may get a link.
We're going into the Czech Republic now.
It just blows
my gosh.
mind.
Okay, so here's a really good blow up. And now we're zooming in on her face and her beautiful hair.
Look at the cross contour, how he's setting the eyes into the socket. And the parallel lines are coming off of the nose that are giving us all the right information. And look at how they get wider as they move into the eye socket. Mm-hmm. The ones that counteract that are building the volume that leads us out of the eye socket. He builds the volume and the light across the cheek with these parallel lines. Look at him.
Lips.
I know.
The lips are like 5 cross hatches on the top and
it's
6 underneath.
Look at the beautiful eyes. You can see that there's light getting caught behind the iris, and yet isn't this ridiculous?
Oh my God, we're so close. I've never seen eyeballs that have parallel lines in them like that.
But when you
totally
zoom out,
works.
Boom, 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 boom. Now look, all of a sudden, oh yeah, there it is. Boom. And so, this has got to be accomplished with some kind of magnification, which does exist at this time. Mm-hmm. But you start looking at how his mind works. Look at the lift in the hair.
Her jawline.
Isn't that stunning?
It's just a couple of lines that become thinner.
Yeah, the figure ground reversal there where the reflected light on the bottom edge of the jaw. It's like, where are you getting this? I'm so glad that we don't have to look at his paintings, because I'd be perfectly happy with this.
Right, me too.
And that's why, I will come up and look at your etchings or engravings. I mean, this is just exquisite. Look at, when I'm trying to teach drawing and I talk about how, people have a tendency to draw hair and it's like line, line, line. And it looks as though somebody's hair is very greasy and it's been stuck to their head.
Right.
And even here you can see him doing that lift as the hair come out of the follicles, and there's a lift to them as they move around. It's just eerie how splendid look at how beautiful those little curlicues of hair are there. And then we have the regularized, the letters, the thick and the thin of those that look like they could be on the side of a Roman monument. But look how lovely and formal and relaxed. She's not uptight, In fact, she's pensive. There's a veracity to her.
Well, and they must be friends.
Yeah, right? And to have a woman who's a painter getting an engraved portrait, think about what that can mean.
Right.
I don't know anything more about this image than that, but I can tell you that I'm in love with it. I just think, you win, Claude.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yep.
Now I'm showing Anne another pair, because he's so adept at different ages of people and the different ways that they survey the world that they're looking at it, in our world, the one that we're in. Now, if you didn't know who this lad was, what might you think?
Well, I wouldn't have guessed he was the future king.
Exactly. You would say,
look at that.
Is he, this, what was the other name that we had on there? This very long name he had before he became the King of France.
Oh.
But here is an image of Louis XIV as a child. Now, Louis XIV, you may know him, he's the guy that'll become the Sun King, and I am the state, and the sun rose and set with him, and, he's the dude that built Versailles. He was born in 1638, and he became king in 1643 at the age of 5.
Whoa.
And his mom, his regent, Marie de Medici, was the one that ruled in his place until he became of age. Now, isn't that interesting? That's when Rubens is painting that whole cycle of portraits of her. Mm-hmm. Because the Baroque artist is now celebrating the lives of not only the aristocratic, but also some other folks, artists, thinkers, and so you start realizing the importance of an image. Not just for the wealthy, but for those who are in the thinking occupation? The people, the creators, we're starting to see that.
I've always been curious, though, like what kind of person would want to collect portraits of people they didn't necessarily know. I mean, aside from the rulers, if you were a supporter of the ruler, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it's funny, because there's so many of them.
Well, and that's why I kept thinking, well, portraits are dull, blah, blah,
Well,
blah.
some of them are.
But they are. But the thing that we come to realize, and you'll see soon that with Louis XIV, how it becomes so absolutely essential, was that portraiture was this new language of visual communication with the public. You have images, they're in print, they're in multiples. Some people would collect those because that's their way of knowing this is what this person thought. This is how they're thinking. That's their way of learning history because it's about the people. If you think of each of these as a little tiny TV screen, where you're saying, oh, this is who's existing, and they're important, and they've been engraved because they are X, Y, or Z.
It's like People magazine.
Yeah. But yeah, and so they could have political meaning, they could have artistic meaning, they could have spiritual meaning. But
this portrait of Louis XIV, which we don't have a close-up of, I can tell, though, that the background behind him, he's also set in one of these ovals. And behind the oval is these horizontal parallel lines, per usual. But can you see them?
Oh, yes, right, on the outside,
But then inside behind him is, again, this swooping arc of parallel lines around him that have no other cross, no convex, no concave.
In a way, it's almost like he's already been enhaloed, that he's already emanating power at this young age. And I don't have an exact date, but...
And the fabric, too, of his coat.
And he's just looking at us, and at one point I would say, oh, that's a kind of a neat little kid. And then you realize, oh, shit, it's Louis XIV. And then this lovely Maddalena Corvina, this is from 1636. Look at her.
Another engraved portrait in an oval, as we have seen.
And she's just lovely. And if I was more up on my French, she's something about a school, and vis-a-vis the Côté de la Samaritaine, she's very beautiful. And maybe she's just a beautiful woman that... miniatrice romana.
I think isn't she a printmaker? Madame d'Estampes?
I'm hoping so. I was like, see, you're the French person.
On the Quai d'École.
Right?
Yeah, I think, maybe she's a print seller.
Either way, she's in the right trade.
Yeah.
But look at her. Look how much time he spent giving you the plumpness around at the corners of her mouth and just the start of a cleft chin. It's remarkable. They've seen engraving beautifully used by Albrecht Dürer and Night, Death, and the Devil. But it's a completely different world here that we've seen. And it's not the Holtzius of the mythological. These are actual people. I feel as though I'm looking at people.
Well, he's brought them into an intimate setting, which we haven't seen before. Because engraving has always been kind of, not Dürer maybe, but sort of it becomes such a staid thing. And then suddenly you're like, I know that person because of how delicately he has rendered the face.
Exactly. And then you start looking.
Oh, my head.
For instance, here we have Charles I de Crequy, the Duke of Ludwig.
1633.
Well, now this is ridiculously ornate, and he's wearing.
He's a prince.
He's wearing armor along with a lace collar, and you can tell that he's not the youngest guy. Plus, he's got a
really weird.
Do you suppose that's one of those black dots that covers the?
You think syphilis?
But you also look at this wispy. This hair looks like Rembrandt etched hair. You see that? It's so light and airy. But here's the absurd part. Look at how it breaks up and it turns into the lines. He's flexing here. Rembrandt's little lines would go off into white, the negative space. And Mellan is taking them and he's letting them get absorbed by the glowing concavity of the space that this important person is sitting in.
Because this guy, again, has that parallel lines looping up over his head inside the oval.
And then look at this this lovely...
The banderole is amazing.
Yeah, it's just a flat... You can hear it like flutter, flutter, flutter.
Trompe-l'oeil here.
Totally. And he's getting more and more adept at trompe-l'oeil, fooling our eye into what is there. And even there you can start seeing, I've signed it a little bit at the bottom, so on and so forth.
I feel like we're rattling on with things that we haven't discussed or described. So the trompe-l'oeil thing, which shows up in many places in art history, in this case means that the dedication along the bottom is engraved in such a way that it looks like it's on a ruffled wavy piece of paper that's pinned to the board.
Literally pinned to it with curling edges.
And it looks like it's coming off of the page. And
like you could, like,
trompe l'oeil is fool the eye.
Fooling the eye, and you, like, for instance, like when George Washington saw, Charles Wilson Peele's Staircase Group, he leaned down to pick up the little fake card that was on the bottom step.
Right.
Because this verisimilitude is unbelievable.
Yes.
People haven't seen this before, not in the printed realm.
Have we seen any trompe l'oeil yet?
No.
I don't think we have.
No.
Where are we? 1633.
Yeah. I don't think, now people can, folks,
welcome to phone in.
and you can just say, hey,
have you seen this?
I mean, you could say there was the Intarsia wood cabinets that were done, that were very trompe l'oeil in Italy, but that's not in this sense. But it's that complete respect for an artist being able to have things look like nature. And yet, this
But
is
it's also breaking the fourth wall in this case.
completely.
I mean, things can look like the thing, but it's coming up off of the sheet.
Yeah, and if you think about what this looks like, this predates, remember it was, I think, 1648. It was an incredible, it was the pastor who's reaching through time. It's a Rembrandt print.
Sylvius?
Yes, very good.
Thank you.
And he's reaching through the porthole, and he's got his sermon under.
Today.
You win. Anne's getting a pat. Hear this? Yeah, totally. No, that's it. Yes. The preacher Sylvius, and he's reaching through, but that's 15 years after this.
Oh.
And in that case, Rembrandt was using that as his words are so strong they reach beyond the grave.
Right.
And here we have the Carolus. He's very important. He's a duke, if I remember. But it's eerie how, with this ridiculous line work, he's created. It's off in your eyes, Anne, and you go, "Oh, wow, that's."
Yeah.
It's almost like black and white photography in a very strange way.
Well, and as you said at the top of the
spiel,
to your point at the beginning of the reproductive series of 4 episodes that we did, the reproductive printmaker, which I had never thought of before, pardon my French, fucking brilliant, that the reproductive printmakers had figured out with line and engraving how to do the halftone.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if we were to look back at that Mellan and how he did that under the collar, it's like, you son of a bitch. Roy Lichtenstein would be like, damn! I wish I picked up on that. But wait, there's more. Now, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on portraits, but some of them are just really so very dazzling. Jean Perrault, these very important individuals, people, great thinkers, some were aristocrats. Mellan was really becoming very sought after as a portraitist. The strength of his drawing and his ability to grasp the lovely micro-expressions of the sitter were unbelievably adept. I mean, this is an engraving. Now imagine, you do the portrait of the sitter in drawing, and then you engrave the drawing. Right? Now, when Rembrandt's doing a portrait, he's got a grounded plate, and I'm going to venture that he's going scribey-scribey-scribey-scribe. And yes, they'll be backwards, but it's a portrait, and it was a direct response. In this case, he's creating a three-dimensional space. He's carving into this and making this happen. So Mellan, is getting these great, very influential patrons. And what he basically does is apparently he starts to create this who's who of all of the best, brightest folks in the middle of the 17th century in France. I mean, I don't want to say it's a rogues gallery, but it really is. It's almost a pantheon of the brilliant, the rich, the thoughtful
Powerful.
people. Yeah.
Do we know that each of these people is paying for their own portrait, or are there people who are paying for portraits of great thinkers or something?
That's a great question. I have this feeling that these dudes here, like Mr. Great Eyebrows, you got to admit those are some good eyebrows.
Yes, this is Jean Perrault, 1632.
Yeah, and I will say, this is a shout out to one of my coworkers, Chris Keeney, that this dude has your eyebrows, my friend. I mean,
does Chris Keeney listen, I hope?
If he doesn't, well,
he will
Chris actually has to do something to create, to leave a little space between them. But this he's on the verge of Groucho, almost.
Yeah, he is sort of Groucho.
But he's also, look how sweet he is. Look at that little bit of a smile he's got.
Yeah.
And this is more than a century before those wonderful Houdon portraits of Voltaire. So this sense of the informal and the living, breathing likeness of a sitter is happening in this most ridiculous I think it'd be easier to carve a face in 3D of somebody looking animated than it would be to take little parallel lines and put them on a plate and have it read as the very simple robes of this cleric, and give us a sense of those are kindly eyes.
Printmakers already have a certain brain already because they're working backwards, but the engravers, I mean, I know they have a pantheon of patterns that they use to affect velvet or whatever, but I mean, it is kind of like sculpting.
It is.
And leaving the nose instead of carving it. Like, you have to think in a very weird backwards way that my brain is going, I can't.
But it's still sculptural, right?
Absolutely.
And that's why, as he's perfecting and he's getting closer and closer to the... there's one more pair I just had to share. It's just so fascinating.
Good job.
Here's Henriette Anne of England, the Duchess of Orleans. And it's kind of got that weird, almost Habsburg jawishness. And you look at those terrifying pipe curls, but you look at this little girl who's being forced into this clothing. This is not a happy camper. She's doing her job and she's sitting for a portrait, but look at the freaking frame he puts on there.
Yeah, the frame
is completely 3D.
We haven't seen that yet.
Nope. It's like, again, flexing. And look at how adorable Henri Louis Habert de Montmort looks, and this is 1640. It almost looks like he's had a glass of wine, Look at this gorgeous satiny.
Satin.
Isn't that insanity? And look at how he
linen collar.
And then the wispiness of the hair, and then yet he is still putting him into this niche. And it's
he's shading it now. He's giving you the convexity.
Can you see it bumping up? He's like, I'm getting smarter and smarter and smarter. And it's just lovely and fun to see how he's Latinizing some of this. And of course, Ludwig is going to make me very happy. Ludwig Lewis, yes, absolutely. But these winsome, believable souls. Now, I had to throw this one in here.
What is happening here?
Well, I'm going to say that this is the most bizarre portrait of Edward G. Robinson that I've seen. I went, whoa, that's Edward Little Caesar. Yeah, see?
Oh, my goodness.
Doesn't it look like 1932, I think, or 1933 was Edward G. Robinson and Little Caesar. But it's Raffaello Menicucci. Look at that shrewd, thick-lipped fellow who's looking out. It's like he's gonna take you out if you mess with him.
Well, he looks almost blind. Like there's something very vacant in his eyes.
One of them.
Yeah.
But the other one looks like it's like staring into your heart.
Yeah, like he's sort of, he looks like a mafia boss.
Totally. Little Caesar.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you can see here, now we're starting to get the parallel lines. It's starting, I can see the Mellan coming through. But then those tiny little marks that just defy engraving.
The hair is crazy.
Yeah. So then I have to give you this other portrait. Now, reminding you that we've talked about how a quarter of Mellan's production is portraiture. His job as an artist is to bring things absolutely to life. And so here we have a portrait, if you will, of a bust of the adult Christ. And this is done in 1652. I want Anne to tell you what she's seeing in this Adorate Dominum omnes sanctes eus. I mean,
well, his neck is like contiguous with his skull. Like it's a little out of proportion, but have we lost all the cross contour? Almost though.
Those are pretty much parallel.
Yeah, and Christ's curls are rather glorious, and his beard is amazing.
God, I know, right? Isn't that sick? I want to remind us that he is a part of a society whose devotion to the cross and to Jesus Christ and to complete faith is without question. And if you questioned it, you wouldn't be expecting the
Inquisition.
Correct. But his job is to amplify these important people, beings, deities, and whatnot. So in a way, he has given you a portrait of what Christ could be. There's a real famous portrait of Christ that was painted, God, it's like some kind of almost Middle Eastern name. When I was working at Wesley Theological Seminary, they referred to it as Christ's senior picture. He's got, I'll have to show it to you. It's got the same kind of long hair, kind of looking up with the slanted shoulders, and it's sort of lugubrious. It looks, sort of, wow, it's sort of sad, and I'm still blessing you. You know not what you do, but this sense of making Jesus come to life and understand that he is a part of this and he's forgiving you. His job is to portray that too. You know, he is a part of the church. Mellan did a ton of religious works, large ones. And again, like we were talking about with those...
Well, this is 17 by 12, this portrait of the adult Christ. That's big.
Yeah.
That's those little portraits of the little girl and the little dauphin. Or
they're like much more...
Well, they were like 5 by 7.
Yeah, but you could buy a 5 by 7 or an 8 by 10 frame for them.
Right.
But this is the big deal. But I wanted for us to think about how he is proving a sensitivity to classical ideals as well. And if you look at the way that hand is constructed, it's really quite remarkable that he does give you this sculpturesque kind of qualities. Before we give you the
dun,
mountaintop
dun, dun, dun.
moment, we're going to let there be a little break.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Platemark. True and I really appreciate your participating in our conversation about prints in the Western world. And we love Claude Mellan even more now than we did when we were first planning this episode. As I said at the top, pictures are over on platemarkpodcast.com, so you can follow along with True's talk. And there's also a support and donate button to help us keep the lights on. It's just me over here editing. I think that's it. We'll see you next time.